Donald Trump is on a suing bonanza. He has sued, and we knew about this one, ABC News. He has sued CBS News. And now he's adding to the list, in the latest and greatest, the New York Times. He's suing the New York Times and he's suing Random House, Penguin Publishing, because you know what? They didn't give him a fair shake. In his estimation, this is a very hostile media, very biased media, that has defamed him over and over and over again. That's what we saw, remember, with George Stephanopoulos? He personally sued George Stephanopoulos, who is the host of that weekend show over on ABC News, and he sued ABC News and Disney as well for defamation related to that hush money scandal, Stormy Daniels case, which, by the way, we're still waiting. Judge Merchan seems to have realized, he doesn't have quite the sentencing authority given what the Supreme Court said about immunity. So he's punting on that one. He's looking for some legal angles. He's not going to get them. So that'll be coming out. Watch next week. Anyway, Donald Trump, he kind of has sort of had it with a media that went after him, took things out of context. Remember the good people on both sides thing? That even Snopes, whatever it is, had to actually say, no, that's not right. You think about all those debates. You had ABC News, for example, debating him with David Muir and the woman who we can't remember, who I'd actually never heard of before, but apparently she also went to Howard University or something like that. Anyway, she was on the debate as well, and it was like David, this lady, all ganged up with Kamala against Donald Trump. Well, he's like, that's actually not really fair. And he's kind of right. The question is it defamation? Do you as a public figure still have the right to sue? I believe you should, and that you do. He obviously believes that too, so you could possibly see an organization like CBS News put out of business for that interview that they did with him. Think about 60 Minutes and Leslie Stahl, and she sat there and said, but President Trump, there's no way that laptop is real. We know it's not real. And he's like, what are you talking about? Of course it's real. Hunter Biden laptop. Well, Donald Trump was right. CBS News and Leslie Stahl, they were wrong. And they tried to make him look like a fool and a liar and then some. So shouldn't he have some recourse? I think he does. And then they're just blatantly biased when it comes to the likes of Kamala, and they've got to, remake her sound and re-edit the thing so that somebody can actually understand what she's saying. Of course, we still couldn't, let's be honest.
How about 60 Minutes, the way they protected Kamala? She gave an answer. Think of it. 60 Minutes, CBS, and they ought to lose their license and they ought to take it off the air. It's the biggest. How about this? She gives an answer that was cognitively a mess, right? She gives an answer that was grossly incompetent. They removed the entire answer and put another answer in there. Where the hell? They don't do that with anybody that I've ever heard. With me, they do the opposite. I give them a gorgeous, full-flowing, magnificent, beautiful answer. I call it the weave, right? Always get right back to the right place, but you cover a lot of territory this way. But you give a beautiful answer, and then what they do is they take pieces of it out, and all of you say, what the hell happened to my beautiful answer? They do the opposite. And that's bad too, but that's not like this. They took her entire answer out, threw it out, and they said, this looks terrible. And they put a new answer in. That's the biggest scandal, in my opinion, because that's election interference. That's the biggest scandal in the history of broadcasting. Right? The biggest scandal in the history of broadcasting, in my opinion. We'll see what happens. They're being sued. They're being sued by a lot of people. No, they should lose their license for that, right? The fake news is protected. How dare he say that? Why would he ever say lose it? They took her answer, threw it out, and gave her a new answer, and they're trying to defend it. Boy, can you imagine if that happened with me? It would be over. The electric chair. And by the way, does anybody have any doubt that they worked with her campaign to get rid of that stupid answer? She's a mess. She's a cognitive mess, and nobody wants to talk about it, and we can't.
So listen, he's going to have to try and prove all this. I mean, he certainly has a few things on his side. Think about this. Remember the interview that Joe Biden was going to do with the Philadelphia news anchor at the Black-owned radio station, and it turns out they gave every single question that they wanted Joe Biden to be asked to this lady, and then she went on CNN and actually admitted it. Kind of a no-no. Well, first of all, you never take questions, especially when the guy's running for president. My gosh, I mean, that's like journalism 101, whatever. The point being, they were looking for these friendly media spots. They must have assumed CBS was friendly media. But his point is, like, it can't all be friendly media, right? Like, this is getting a little ridiculous. So again, launching a whole host of lawsuits. I want to just point to some of them. This is a big deal. I mean, you get the New York Times. He's actually personally suing some of the article's authors that were politically, in his view, targeting him, including Peter Baker, Michael Schmidt, Suzanne Craig, and Russ Buter for, quote, false and defamatory statements about Donald Trump, adding that the New York Times is, quote, a full-throated mouthpiece of the Democrat Party that wages, quote, industrial-scale libel against political opponents. It certainly felt that way. I mean, look what I keep going back to this because it's just the most vivid example of how insane the media is. When the New York Post got that laptop that was Hunter Biden's laptop, courtesy of Rudy Giuliani, who gave it to them because somebody had called Rudy about it, and the entire media establishment said no way. I mean, it reminded me like 2020. You know, the entire media establishment said, how dare you talk out against lockdowns? How dare you speak out and say that maybe, I don't know, the virus might have come from the lab in Wuhan, China, where they're actually working on how to develop this particular virus? I mean, we can't say these things. You couldn't say these things. And that's a pretty scary thing. What you could say was Donald Trump was bad. Donald Trump was awful. Donald Trump was Hitler. And he's saying, hang on, this was false. It was defamatory. And you deserve to be sued for it. Because you know what? It's still a free country. This is still America after all. I get he's a public figure, okay? And when you're a public figure, you kind of don't get the same benefit as somebody who's not a public figure. That said, when it becomes that egregious and then insane, and they're talking about the Russian tape, remember that one? That was all a bunch of bogus nonsense. I mean, at some point, where's the responsibility? They do become, if you would, mouthpieces for an establishment, a regime, and it becomes a threat, frankly, to the overall well-being of our society. That's what's happened. So it's a 19-page brief. They're seeking $10 billion in damages for CBS in particular, accusing CBS of, quote, going into overdrive to get Kamala elected. Now, the reason it's kind of an issue when it comes to CBS is that they're going over the airwaves, right? They're going over the FCC airwaves. It's a little different over here where I can have an opinionated show and say whatever I want for the most part. But, I am very responsible and I wouldn't do crazy stuff or say crazy things out of respect for myself, out of respect for you guys. But apparently, they're totally fine doing all the crazy stuff over at these mainstream media outlets like CBS or like the New York Times. So he's accusing this outlet of, quote, partisan and unlawful acts of voter interference through malicious, deceptive, and substantial news distortion. Wow. Okay, so that's just CBS. He's also going after, as I said, the New York Times. He's going after Penguin Random House, the Daily Beast. And this is what happens, right? You cannot make up lies about someone, print them as fact, and think it's perfectly fine. He also has complained to the Federal Election Commission about the Washington Post owned by Jeff Bezos, saying that the Post, which you'll remember, refused to endorse a candidate, maybe in part because of this stuff, that the allegations he's making, I guess, against Donald Trump, he's making these allegations of illegal, in-kind contributions to Harris's campaign. That's sort of fascinating. So when the Washington Post is just over and over and over and over again printing all this whatever, and it's all pro-Kamala and anti-Trump, at what point does that become almost, if you would, kind of like a political donation? And as this, quote, newspaper of record, should you really be that far extended? It's an interesting question and may have contributed into why Jeff Bezos said, you know what, we're not going to actually endorse candidates in the future. I think that was a wise decision. I mean, if you present yourself as journalism with a capital J, then why are you going around stumping for this candidate or that candidate? I mean, unless there's money involved. Ha! Is that what this is? Is this just pure capitalism? Was it money? Because, you know, I know Reverend Al Sharpton is caught up in a bit of a scandal with MSNBC. Apparently his organization collected some $500,000 before he sat down on MSNBC with Kamala Harris. I mean, you get Oprah Winfrey, who's like, no, I didn't do this. I didn't get any money. But Harpo Productions got money, $1 million, according to the Washington Examiner, who has reviewed all of the election filings. I mean, this is bad. This is really, 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 really bad. And he should be suing. He should go after all of them. I'm happy to see this because you know what? We need some sanity restored to the media one of these days. I wonder how sick he is of having to watch the likes of Whoopi Goldberg. How about this? You know, when she couldn't even say his name, she had to spit when she did.
Listen, take him seriously and take him literally.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that we have to, I think it would be remiss of us to not say, Joe Biden knows how to do this.
Yes.
He knows how to do this. He's quite good at this. And, you know, you can't refute anything with him because he just, when I say him, I mean...
He rambles.
Trump.
Yeah.
He tends to just...
But can I mention one thing?
Okay, so it was like this every single day, nonstop, over there at The View. And I suspect that all this stuff kind of adds up to kind of an advertising in kind, if you would. I mean, it's funny because it completely backfired. Spectacularly backfired. People were so sick of this that, you know, they're like, I don't trust that mainstream media anymore. I don't want to hear those lies. And so they saw through it. But does it change the fact that they're defaming him in the process if they're saying things that are not true? And to be very clear, the reason this is important right now is because not just Donald Trump, but because anybody who comes along and represents a different point of view than the establishment elites in the media, they represent a threat to them, and they're going to go after them with everything they've got. Remember when they said Mitt Romney was going to put blacks back in chains? Or do you remember when for 5 minutes they thought that Ron DeSantis actually had a shot and that Donald Trump might not run and that Ron DeSantis was going to be the candidate for president? How quickly they turned on him. Whoopi Goldberg, the same Whoopi that can't say Trump without spitting, she started saying that Ron DeSantis was doing what he could to erase black people. Wow. I mean, doesn't he deserve to sue too? Listen.
I'm tired of explaining it.
Yeah.
I'm tired of explaining it.
Yeah.
You know? And just so we're clear, we're not going anywhere. We've been here, Mr. DeSantis. Many of us have been here for generations. Can you say the same?
I don't think he can.
And by
No, I don't think he can.
By the way, he's not that this is what matters. He's undercut. His best argument was electability against Trump. I'm the more electable candidate. In the past few weeks alone, in addition to this fiasco around AP Black History, he's also had to let a staffer go for sharing a outright Nazi meme. He's put out that insane anti-LGBTQ Pride Month video that he never, I don't believe, denounced. And every day there's just a new report of like chaos within his campaign. He keeps, and you guys know, I once liked DeSantis. I was like, oh, he seems interesting. He's revealing
you
himself.
liked him until apparently it wasn't expedient for you to like him anymore. But you heard Whoopi, right? She's worried that DeSantis was going to erase black people. I bring that up because it's important for everybody to understand. This is not, I mean, Trump's the guy who's like fighting back with all he's got. But it's not exclusive to Donald Trump. This is what they do to Republicans. This is their line of attack. I mean, go all the way back to the days of Barry Goldwater. They were trying to call him a Nazi. Barry Goldwater, and this is what they do, okay? So here we are, And you got somebody who's like, I'm not gonna take it. Sue, 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 sue. And then the media is like, oh my goodness, this is such a threat. The Committee to Protect Journalists is calling Trump's threats against the press a, quote, clear and direct danger to media freedom. Well, what about the clear and direct danger to people's reputations? To their own personal lives when you say all kinds of things about them? I think they ought to have some recourse. Isn't that why we have a legal system? All right, New York Times, you better be careful what you print. Because if you print something that's wrong or that is basically something that could be construed as libel, then guess what? You deserve to be sued. Nobody's actually been willing to take on the establishment before. They all sit there and they take it. And now suddenly you got a guy who's like, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so. We're going to play by a more fair set of rules. And that's good news. Very, very good news.
Last night, millions of Americans tuned in to one of the most shameful hours we have ever seen on cable television.
I'm showing you this clip. I'm showing you this clip because, do you remember Tucker Carlson? He dared to go in a direction that the establishment didn't want him to go. Hey, yours truly guilty of the exact same thing. When I saw the market falling out of bed 2,000 points in one day, I'm like, okay, enough is enough. CNN needs to get off of its plane crash, terrifying, constant 24/7 coverage of COVID and like take a deep breath. And we got to be like sensible about this because I knew we were going to shut down our country. I'm like, this is kind of getting a little out of hand, guys. And you knew what they would do with that, right? You knew what they would do with that. I knew what they would do with that. And the media went nuts. Thank goodness they did. I wouldn't be here with you right now had that not happened. But the same thing happened because Tucker Carlson dared to go out and say, hey, I'm going to expose what J6 may actually have been. Let me go get all the tape. We don't need to have Nancy Pelosi's daughter's edited version, the documentary filmmaker that she is, version of this. I'm going to go get the actual raw tape and show it to people. And they went bonkers. I guarantee you, Chuck Schumer is one of the reasons why they fed Tucker Carlson to the wolves. They made a decision. And by the way, he wasn't even wrapped up in all that Dominion stuff. I mean, that's their own stupidity, frankly, because they didn't have a legal chief that was smart enough to be able to, contain the newsroom, if you would, and understand their own vulnerabilities surrounding that. So they had to pay nearly $1 billion. But that actually wasn't Tucker that was out over his skis on that one. But they decided to get rid of him. What? Because of this. Let's go back and watch Schumer.
Last night, millions of Americans tuned in to one of the most shameful hours we have ever seen on cable television. Fox News host Tucker Carlson ran a lengthy segment last night arguing the January 6th Capitol attack was not a violent insurrection. I don't think I've ever seen a primetime cable news anchor manipulate his viewers the way Mr. Carlson did last night. I don't think I've ever seen an anchor treat the American people and American democracy with such disdain.
There's nothing that shameful that has ever appeared on American television in the history of the media.
Yeah, did you notice how he wasn't allowed to continue that series the following week? And then he was gone. So you wonder how that works, right? I'll tell you how it works. There's an establishment elite that makes the decisions about where we're going at all times. And if you are not in sync with that, you're on the outs. Well, guess what? There's a new establishment elite. America just elected a new establishment elite. So that means we ought to be able to say what we think. We ought to be able to have real conversations, explore truth. I'm excited. By the way, quick shout out for the store because Christmas is coming up. The TrishRegan.shop, everyone, and a quick reminder to make sure you subscribe to this. But I will say this, you know what, Tucker Carlson? No sooner did that all happen than this happened.
We have some news from within our Fox family. Fox News Media and Tucker Carlson have mutually agreed to part ways. Tucker's last show was this past Friday. And starting tonight, Fox News Tonight will air live at 8 p.m. Eastern. It will be an interim show with rotating Fox News personalities until a new
And
host.
there you go. The rest is history, right? I'll tell you, these guys, they're in charge, and they don't want anybody else in the way. So it's kind of great about right now.